Wonderful. I see Orange County, Miami. Paul, you're welcome to all of our teachers, our guests, and our incredible presenters. We're going to get started with session 4. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody has been enjoying their sessions so far, and I hope that everybody had a wonderful lunch. Session 4 is about to get started. It is Croc Talk, Conservation of the American Crocodile at the FPL Turkey Point Clean Energy Center. As a reminder, use your chat to introduce yourself and to ask any questions along the way. We'll be watching this chat box and present your questions at the end of the presentation. Keely, change slides for us. Thank you. Before we introduce Michael Lloret, let me thank FPL offering Environmental Stewardship Award. We'll be offering this award every year now to our champion schools. So congratulations to Galaxy E3 Elementary School again on your incredible efforts at moving the Everglades Literacy Program and champion schools into your community in innovative ways and through action. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Michael Lloret. He will be presenting Talk. Today we welcome him as a wildlife biologist and crocodile specialist at the Turkey Point Clean Energy Center in Florida City. Michael is responsible for Crocodile Management Program, Invasive Species Management, and all other wildlife needs at Turkey Point. We'll be learning about conservation efforts in place to protect the American crocodile and how long-term data is being collected. 40 years. I mean, that's just an impressive set of data. And as we talk about making observations over time, it's a great set of tools we can use. And we'll be following up with some worksheets to guide you and your students through those data charts that we're sharing today. Just so you know, Mike is a partner and active member of the University of Florida Croc and the South Florida Water Management District's Python Elimination Program. And if he doesn't share, he's a former teacher. So let's welcome Michael. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Happy to be here and excited to give the Croc Talk. So let's go ahead and jump right on in and get started. Oh, there we go. 1, 2. Okay, so Croc Talk, conservation of the American crocodile at the FPL Turkey Point Clean Energy Center. So it's quite an interesting situation, right? We are a nuclear power plant, we're our clean energy center, and here we have this federally protected species that calls our grounds home. We have basically 6,000 acres where the power plant sits, and all the surrounding areas are protected natural areas. Crocodiles versus alligators. We have both that call our site home. And it's crazy to see basically the average Floridian doesn't realize that we have native crocodilians here, right? We have alligators, which are native. We have American crocodiles, which are native. And we also have the spectacled caiman, which is non-native, not supposed to be here. And they were introduced from Central and South America. The American alligator is the most common crocodilian species that we have here in South Florida, but not the most common on Turkey Point grounds. In general, the American alligator prefers to live in freshwater. They don't have saltwater glands that help them excrete the salt like an American crocodile does. So in general, when you do see a crocodilian species in South Florida, it is an alligator. Now, as you make your way more to brackish and saltwater, you're more likely to see a crocodile. Now, right off the bat, if you look at both of those images in the slides, you can see there's quite a difference there. The American alligator is a lot darker in coloration, and that's pretty standard across the board. Most American alligators are very dark in coloration versus the crocodile that's typically a little bit lighter, especially when they're younger animals. They have more of a yellowish, greenish, grayish tint to them, but they can be quite variable, which makes things a little bit confusing sometimes. When you look at the American alligator's skeletal structure and skull structure, they have a much wider head, right? Much wider snout. And actually, if you guys could look at my screen here, have an American alligator skull, and you can see how wide this skull is. This skull belonged to just about a 6-7 foot animal, so not too big, but you can see how really wide that is. Now, another characteristic of the American alligator is that they typically have kind of like an overbite. So when you're trying to identify an alligator versus a crocodile, if you see those teeth only pointing down from the top jaw, these teeth right here, you know that it's an alligator. Now, a crocodile will have overlapping teeth like this. So you'll see both sets of teeth overlapping, teeth facing up and teeth facing down from both the top and bottom jaw. And you can see that here on this giant crocodile skull. So this is about as big as they get here in South Florida. This is an American crocodile, an adult male. He was about a 12.5 foot animal, very large, right? And you can see the comparison. It's a lot skinnier, even though this animal was a lot larger than the alligator skull, right? Look how much wider towards the front the alligator skull is, this one in my right hand versus the crocodile skull. Now, because our cooling canal system is salt water, we mainly deal with crocodiles. However, every once in a while, we will have an alligator that pops up on site as well. The first crocodile was discovered at Turkey Point in 1976. You can see in the background the power plant. And then in the forefront here, you can see an American crocodile. There it is, circled. You can see how great their camouflage is. You know, the cooling canal system obviously was not built for crocodiles. Little did we know how perfect the habitat and how conducive it is for the success of this species. So you see several images here, aerial footage of the cooling canal system. The background image there is facing from north to south. And these front little canals here are what we call the test canals. And the canals in the back are the cooling canal system, right? That's 168 linear miles of cooling canals. And that water is used as a secondary cooling source for the reactor. The plant's cooling canal system was built in 1974, so it's been around for quite a bit. And if you remember from the previous slide, the first crocodile was recognized in 76. So it didn't take long for crocodiles to start showing up here on site. The cooling canal system offers optimum habitat for the crocodiles, right? We have raised berms, the strips of land that go throughout the cooling canal system that can be up to 8 feet above the water level. Why is this important? The crocodiles, especially with how our earth is changing right now with things such as sea level rise, their historical nesting areas are getting washed away on the coast. So here we have this artificial strip of land that is high above the water level, and it's perfect for these crocodiles to incubate their eggs. We also have both shallow and deep areas for the crocodiles to breed, and we have optimum basking areas as well. In 1979, once we realized that this is such fantastic habitat for the American crocodile, Turkey Point was designated critical habitat for the species. The system represents one of 3 primary nesting populations in the United States. So it's Turkey Point, Crocodile Lake in Key Largo, and Everglades National Park. So who would have thought a nuclear power plant would be the top 3 nesting areas for the American crocodile? On average, we have about 300 to 400 American crocodiles in our cooling canal system. Look at that beautiful crocodile smiling for us. The crocodile monitoring began at Turkey Point when the first nest was found in 1978. So because we are a power plant, right, there's a lot of construction, there's a lot of operation going on. And what happened was an operator was digging, they hit what ended up being a nest, and they said, hey, these aren't chicken eggs, right? Called in a biologist, the biologist came out and said, wow, these are American crocodiles. And since then, we've been monitoring the American crocodile. We do population studies that tell us all about how much they're moving, so much about their behavior, their health, how much they're growing, how old they're getting in our system, and the number of individuals that we have in the system. And what I always like to explain is that our land is not enclosed in any way. The crocodiles are able to go and come as they please. And with that being said, we actually have crocodiles that live here year round. We have crocodiles that come in for breeding and nesting, and pretty much everything in between, right? The babies that hatch here have the ability to stay if they'd like, or they're also able to get out, go south into Florida Bay, right? Or go east into Florida Bay or the surrounding canals. So crocodiles are found in all of these areas, and we get to study them. So it's pretty cool situation. As I mentioned, we have the elevated berms, which is a major factor for these crocodilians, right? So the females come in looking for the nesting areas, the males come in chasing the females, and as I stated before, the babies have the ability to come in and go as they please. Contrary to popular belief, right? The most common misconception that we get is that people think the crocodiles are here for the warm water. Now, although crocodiles are very dependent on warm habitat to survive, they do not come here just for the warm water. Although they may enjoy it in the winter, right, to warm up if the water's cold, they're mainly here for the nesting area and habitat. One thing I didn't mention earlier, the difference between crocodiles and alligators as well, is that alligators are very cold tolerant, right? So they're able to be found all the way up until the Carolinas. And this is why the crocodile population is so important to protect, right? They're federally protected, and they basically have a geographical cap onto where they can live because of their cold intolerance, right? So they don't get much further than South Florida, which means if some type of environmental disaster were to come and negatively impact the population, some type of disease were to negatively impact the population, it's such a small piece of habitat that it could really hurt this population, right? So pretty interesting stuff. One of the other things that we do here at Turkey Point that makes us unique is we create habitat. So because we are private land, have the ability to modify our land to encourage the American crocodiles to come into nest, right? So we regularly clear out vegetation so that these crocodiles can come back to their historic nesting site year after year. We also are able to move earth, right? Move dirt to where we think crocodiles would like to nest. And we create freshwater ponds or fresher water ponds. So we'll actually go out, we'll take a backhoe, we'll dig out ponds that fill up with rainwater. As I stated before, our cooling canal system is salty. What's really interesting is that these baby crocodiles hatch and their salt glands are not developed, which means they're not able to pull the salt, excrete the salt out of the salt water and live in a saline environment when they hatch. It takes them about 2 months to develop those salt glands. So these ponds allow a way for this rainwater to be trapped. The mother crocodiles know that when they retrieve the babies from the nest, they'll take them to these ponds and drop them off. And this fresh water film collects on the surface of the ponds. These babies have a freshwater source where they can grow big, happy, and healthy until they develop those salt glands like the adults and go into the saltwater system. Now you can see a pretty interesting picture there. As a biologist, I'm out always looking for signs like this, right? Part of my job is to be extremely observant, and I also do a lot of training for other employees here on site to be aware of situations such as the one that you see here. This is clearly a crocodile slide. A crocodile has been going up and down this area and using this habitat. So anytime I see a tail drag, any kind of tracks, anything that shows me that crocodiles are using that area, I'll make a note. If anybody's working in that area, I'll make sure that they're aware, and I'll make sure that nobody gets near the area so that the crocodile can be protected. Now, nesting and hatching surveys are conducted from April to August. So basically, depending on what nature gives us will determine my job as a biologist, right? So typically speaking, they nest within the same 2 weeks every year, and they hatch within the same month or so every year, right? So in January, February, all the crocs start to collect in our cooling canal system. So the ones that I was mentioning earlier that might live off site, they start coming in. And then the ones that live here year round are obviously already here. And then March, April, they start to nest, and it takes about 90 days for those babies to incubate. And then we're in the season which we're in right now, which is hatching season, which starts late June. July is our craziest month where the most babies are hatching, and then it usually kind of slows off into early August. There they are, a beautiful handful of baby American crocodiles, and those are fresh little hatchlings. As I mentioned before, on average, American crocodiles incubate for about 3 months. So it takes 3 months since the mother lays the eggs in the ground for that embryonic development to produce a fully formed baby crocodile. The whole process is so fascinating, and we really haven't even scratched the surface of understanding these animals. These mother crocodiles, they have an internal clock that tells them when to go and check on these baby crocodiles. And they'll actually go up on the mound, hit the mound, and wait for the sound of the baby crocodiles, which is a calling mama. Once they hear that, they'll dig them up, pick up those babies in their mouth, and actually assist hatch them, right, by putting gentle pressure on those eggs for those babies to hatch. Here we have this apex predator, an animal that has a reputation to be so dangerous, yet it can be so gentle. Once the crocodiles hatch, we catch as many of them as we possibly can, bring them back to the lab, and collect biometric data, right? So we basically have a 5-step process. We catch them, bring them back to the lab, we microchip them, so we put in a microchip just like you would your dog or your cat. We cut unique scoop clip numbers in the tail, so it's just like cutting your nail. Doesn't hurt them. It's cutting the cartilage on their tail, and that's a permanent mark that we're able to use to identify these animals out in the field. So even if I'm not able to catch that animal, use a scanner to scan its microchip to know exactly which animal it is. If I can see enough of its tail, I can identify that animal in the field, come back to our database, and recognize exactly which animal that is. We record all types of biometrics, right? Total length, head length, snout to vent length, tail girth length. We weigh them, we sex them, we find out if they're male or female. And then the best part, we release them back into the wild. And when we do release them, we release them into our man-made release ponds. And these ponds are mainly fresher water, right, to give the baby crocodiles a better chance at survival, with mangroves and beautiful cover to protect them from predators. Give them a really good shot at survival. Here you see us moving a larger animal here, and that's part of our quarterly 3 to 4 times a year, right, crocodile captures. We go out in the system and we try to catch as many crocodiles as we possibly can, whether they're this big or 13 feet long. We put them up on the boat. We record all those biometrics, the ones I just mentioned earlier. If they haven't been caught before, they'll be fully processed. They'll get the scoop clips. They'll get the microchips implanted. If they have been before, then we're just measuring them. We're measuring them. We're weighing them. We're finding out where it was that we last caught them, how much they've grown since we've last caught them, what does their health look like, you know, are they nice and big and healthy, or are they skinny? This is all really important information to go back into our database to better understand the American crocodile in South Florida. Invasive species. So this is a really hot topic in South Florida. We're being invaded by all these environmental threats, right? They're invasive, they're not from here, they're introduced, and they absolutely thrive in our habitat. So the picture that you see there is an Argentine black and white tegu. Now, this animal is a direct threat to the American crocodile because it has an extreme taste for eggs. Although they are omnivorous, they eat plant matter, they eat animal protein, they really, really like eggs. So it's a big problem for our crocodile nests. They have an extremely great sense of smell and taste. So what FPL does is we go out and we set traps. And these traps, we bait them with eggs because that's one of their favorite foods, so that we can catch and remove as many tegus as we possibly can. Now, another thing that makes tegus unique and so much more of a threat here in Florida, and actually into the more northern areas of North Florida, Georgia, Alabama as well, is that they're cold tolerant. So these tegus can actually go underground during the winter and brumate, which is hibernation for reptiles, for 3-4 months, right, to withstand the cold. And then once it starts warming up, they come out. So it's not like the pythons, where they're cold intolerant and they're not as much of a threat moving up the state where it gets colder, because they'll die in the cold. These tegus are very, very capable of living in the cold, which makes them a lot more of a threat to species in the United States. Pythons is probably the poster child for invasive species. They're an established species here now. They start off as tiny little hatchlings, about this big, 10 inches or so, and they can reach sizes of over 18 feet. The record for the python, the biggest python caught in South Florida, I think is 18 feet and 6 inches. And there are regular programs to remove these animals to try to manage their populations, right? We know they're here to stay, but it's important for us to remove as many animals as we can to give our native species the best chance at survival. So we do that here at Turkey Point as well. Everybody that comes on site is trained to identify a python, and if they see one, they call me out. We'll go out, we'll remove it, and that python will no longer be in the system to harm our native wildlife. Here we go, the statistics. So number of successful crocodile nests at Turkey Point from 1978 to 2019. So as you can see, in 78, it's kind of a slow start. We're still kind of understanding what's going on here. How many crocodiles do we have? Are they nesting here, right? And there's pretty much an increasing trend with a couple dips, and I'll explain some of those dips as we move through these slides. Now, this is number of nests. So the record number of nests at Turkey Point is actually 28. And just last year in 2019, we were one short of that record at 27. This is the number of tagged hatchlings at Turkey Point during our time with this conservation program. And again, you'll see the same type of trends. There is a correlation between nest number and amount of hatchlings recovered. And that's because the more nests in general that we find, the more babies we'll find. If you look at this chart here, this has both the nests and the hatchling numbers. Now, I wanted to get to this one before I explain some of this data, because you can see it all on one graph. Now, there are all different types of factors to consider why the numbers decreased in some years, increased in others. And I'm going to explain some of those to you. In 2010, you can see a dip from the year before, which is our best year for hatchlings, with 548 to 196. If any of you all remember, that was actually a very cold year, and crocodiles cannot handle the cold. So not only are larger animals perishing from the weather, but if the conditions are not suitable for these animals to live and thrive, they're not going to reproduce. So the cold is absolutely going to affect the American crocodile life cycle and reproduction. And if we move forward to 2015, 2016, and 2017, we actually had a seagrass die off in our cooling canal system that made the water quality go down and the salinity go up. So you went from 2014, where there's 409 hatchlings and 25 nests, to 2015, where there's only 9 nests and 119 hatchlings. So that's a big drop. These environmental factors play a big role in the success of the crocodilians. It really is, when you break it down to its most simple level, the crocodiles aren't going to use their energy to breed, to reproduce, to produce offspring, to produce eggs, if they're too caught up in surviving themselves. If they have to use all their energy to just get by, they're not going to have enough energy to produce eggs, right? Or to fight other males or to court females, things like that. So another environmental factor that plays a role is drought. If you remember, the baby crocodiles depend very much on fresher water. So if they don't have that fresh water to drink, that's going to affect the numbers big time, big time. Not only with the health of the adults going into breeding season and their willingness to produce offspring, but also when those babies hatch, their success rate at survival. If they don't have that fresher water, they're not going to make it. And in 2007, right, we're very proud of this. The American crocodile's listing status improved from endangered to threatened. So although they're still federally protected, Turkey Point has played a crucial and critical role at increasing this animal's numbers. You're talking about the American crocodile, which was down to only the 300 number in South Florida at one point. And now we're looking at about 2,000 animals. So it's a great success story. Turkey Point is a critical part. FPL's Turkey Point is a critical part at these American crocodile success stories. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Before we go to questions, I have some guests here. How could I forget? Our beautiful baby crocodiles. I'm trying to hold them up to the screen here. So here's 4 of them. We went out and caught them last night, and these have yet to be tagged. So if you look at their tails, you can see they don't have those scoop clip cuts yet, but we will be giving them the cuts to be able to identify them out in the field. You can see they're rather calm at this size, but they can grow pretty fast, and their teeth get bigger and sharper and stronger. So you wouldn't be able to hold 4 big ones like this. But very beautiful, always fascinating to see these little guys. I'm like a kid in a candy store every time I get to hold them, catch them, handle them. Absolutely love them. Put these guys away. And I have a couple other native species that are with us. This is a Florida box turtle, a native species that we have here on site. It's state protected, right? So the reason we remove invasive species like the tegus, the pythons, is to protect our native species, right? These guys have evolved to live here, and we want to make sure we give them the best chance at survival as we possibly can. So this is an adult male. They don't get much bigger than this, and he's a beautiful little guy. And last but not least, last but not least, we have another beautiful native species. This is a corn snake, and unfortunately, a species that gets a bad reputation because of its coloration, right? People think that because they're red, they're venomous, but they're not venomous. They're harmless. If I could have 1 million of these in my yard, I would, because they're called rat snakes for a reason. They love to eat rats. They're great for rodent control. We have them here on site. When we see them, we make sure we protect them. We move them out of harm's way. We don't want them in the roads or anything like that. This one happens to be my pet, so that I can use him as an educational ambassador and teach about his species. Pretty cool little guy. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. That was an incredible presentation. And I know I see by the chat, we have lots of questions. I know that I had some funny connection and was going in and out. So if this happens again, bear with us. We're just going to move our host to Kim Gooch. But if connection is good, then we'll keep check in with me on the screen here. So lots of connections with our lessons. We teach a lot about alligators, crocodiles, how important they are to this ecosystem, and all the threats they may face, including invasive non-native species. So do you know the water quality of these canals? Do they take water samples and soil samples in these areas?
Yes, so we here in our cooling canal system are highly regulated. We have a team here in my office. We have a team of about more or less 7, 8 people that their job is basically to monitor the water quality in our system. So we're constantly checking for salinity, the soil samples, turbidity. We're doing a lot with seagrass replanting now as well. So all these different types of projects are being monitored daily here at Turkey Point.
Wonderful. What do the crocs eat in these canals?
It's a great question. So in general, anything that fits in their mouth, they will have a go at. The smaller crocodilians, when we've had to do necropsies and things like that, we found everything from fish to insects to crabs. They eat a lot of crabs. We have a lot of crabs on site. And on our berms, we have a lot of mammals as well and birds. So I've seen interactions between large crocodiles and pelicans here, them stalking and hunting pelicans, them eating pelicans. I've seen them eating crabs. I've seen them eating fish. I've seen a big old soft-shell turtle that they ate as well. Crocodilians are opportunistic. So they'll eat animals that are already dead. They'll hunt animals that are alive. Basically anything that they think that they can overpower and fill their bellies with, they'll try to eat.
Makes sense. Thank you. A big one, and a few people have been asking, is there a visitor center or a way to connect at that site? I don't remember there being one, but I may be wrong.
So right now, I work out of the land utilization building, which is our research building. Right now, it's not officially a visitor center, but we are excited in the next couple of years, we are going to be building an area that is going to have a visitor center.
That's great news. Good question. So I know we talked a little bit about this in the graphs, but let's reiterate 2 questions. How many baby crocs normally survive out of a nest?
Statistically speaking, very few. So that's the sad part about this. Well, there's pros and cons, just like anything, right? Most reptiles, right, if you look at things like sea turtles, right, they have large clutch sizes for a reason. That's because most of them don't make it, and most of them are the food source for all the other animals around them, right? So out of a large clutch of crocodiles, you're only going to have 1 or 2 make it to adulthood. I mean, they literally have everything against them. Fish, turtles, birds, other crocodiles. I'll give you a story. Every time we catch crocodiles, we scan their bellies to see if they have microchips of other crocodiles in them as well. And one time we actually caught one that had 8 microchips in it.
Wow.
So that happens regularly as well. Like I was saying, they're opportunistic. So, and, you know, we get questions, oh, what happens if there's too many crocodiles? Well, the American crocodile is extremely shy. They really cause no issues with humans. You follow few simple rules, you will never have an issue with an American crocodile. And the American crocodile itself keeps its population in check by eating each other.
So that was interesting. That's our next question is, do you know the carrying capacity of this site for crocs?
That I don't know. I don't know the carrying capacity. I don't know if that's been studied in depth. I know that they balance themselves out. What makes things kind of complicated for us and for studying crocodilians in general is that they move in and out as they wish. So it's not like we're fenced in and we know exactly how many are here and exactly how many can live here. They're able to come in and out, you know, when the conditions are right, when the conditions suit their needs.
Sure, makes sense. I'm getting a lot of questions about virtual field trips.
That's not something we've done. This is actually the first big Zoom call that we've done. So maybe that's something we can look into in the future.
I think so, Mike. I think that that might have to be something we talk about and look a little bit into. But we have lots of great questions here, and I know our students would be incredibly excited. We always include a species highlight in our symposium, and so this is it. And our students just love to learn about what lives in our environment and how they're thriving. So can you tell us again, I know you had mentioned it in the presentation, but what are the dips in the data? So what, we heard cold, we heard some mating things. So just reiterate kind of what those dips were in those graphs.
So in 2010, we had an extremely cold year in South Florida, and that is what we attest the lower numbers to in that year. If the crocodiles are cold, they're going to focus on the survival of themselves. I always try to paint a picture here. If the crocodile is too cold to function, its job is going to become survival, right? So it's going to dig a cave, a burrow. It's going to be buried up in the mangroves, trying to stay warm. It's not going to be out looking for a mate. It's not going to be out looking for nesting areas. It's going to be focusing on its survival. So that was one of them. In 2015, we know that we had a negative dip in water quality, and that was mainly due to our seagrass die-off. So the salt increased, the salinity increased, and that puts stress on the crocodiles as well. And anytime the environmental factors change, anytime there's any change, the animals are going to react, whether for good or for bad, and that's how we learn. So yeah, we have a whole team dedicated to the water quality, studying everything that's going on there, and the crocodiles are doing well now.
That's good to hear. Yes, we talk about this all the time when we talk about Everglades restoration and those, hypersalinity events and blue-green algae events and how they affect our native species. And so that's interesting to see those dips in your data. What do you do with the invasive species? How do you get rid of them?
They are humanely euthanized. We necropsy them, and we report our findings to Florida Fish and Wildlife, and we share it with any agency that's studying them, such as the University of Florida Croc Docs. Anyone that's interested, we typically share that information with them so that we can all learn from what's going on with these invasive species.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so I do want to reiterate, we have a lot of talk about if we can access this data and how we can share it. And so we can absolutely have the information on our charts. And we'll work with Michael to see if there's anything else that's available that we can share. And our team is already working on some follow-up worksheets, information, and where you can learn how to connect this presentation to your virtual and in-person classroom. We have a few more minutes, so Michael, if you're open to answering a few more questions, we have so many coming in and they're just so good. Is there evidence of disease spreading among crocodiles?
Not that I've seen. We take blood samples from our crocodiles as well on the quarterly capture events. So that blood is analyzed, and if there was any kind of disease that they were finding, or low white blood cell count or anything like that, we would hear back about it and be aware of it. So since I've been working here, and in my knowledge, I don't know of any disease that has really taken over crocodiles. As we know, crocodiles are extremely resilient, right? One of the strongest animals out there. They're survivors. But that's a great question to consider, because if there was a disease that affected the South Florida population, I mean, we could extirpate them rather quickly because they live in such a small area.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection. You're absolutely right, because you would have access to such a relatively small surface area in which they're thriving in. Great. Is there a predator to the American crocodile?
Absolutely. So as babies, pretty much everything eats them. So turtles, fish, alligators. I've seen alligators eating crocodiles. I've seen crocodiles eating alligators. Birds are a big one. I've seen snook specifically. I know I already said fish, but I've seen snook eat baby crocodiles right off the surface. These babies are wired, evolutionarily wired to survive, but they're so vulnerable because there's nothing they can really do as a tiny little hatchling but hide, camouflage and hide. So any other opportunistic predator is going to pick them off.
Yeah, and what about the adult crocodile?
The adult crocodile is anything predate them. Is that
Right.
their biggest threat is humans. So road traffic, alteration of their habitat, right? Fragmentation, filling in ponds that they live in, any kind of habitat alteration is going to affect the crocodile.
Great. I have two more questions for you. How long does the mother crocodile take care of the babies?
Very good question. So to keep it simple, they're much worse mothers than American alligators. So American alligators will react almost like that. If you were to touch their offspring, touch their nest, they're very good mothers. And other crocodile species, like saltwater crocodiles, like Nile crocodiles, are very protective of their nest. Now, the shy nature of the American crocodile basically pushes them to not care for the babies as much. So they'll come, they have their role in digging up the nest, they have their role in transporting their offspring to an ideal place to survive. Um, and then it's very much variable. So we have mothers that leave right away, we have mothers that'll leave in a week, we have mothers that'll leave in a couple weeks, in a month. In general, we know that when we are collecting those babies, mama is home, and very rarely does she react because they're just so shy. They want nothing to do with us. And that's what I really trying to push across here is, you know, they get a bad reputation. You turn on National Geographic, you turn on Animal Planet, and everybody sees the big Nile crocodiles or the saltwater crocodiles. You know, the Nile crocodiles coming out eating a zebra or wildebeest. They assume that our crocodiles are like that. Although they deserve respect, although they need their space, they're very shy. They want nothing to do with us. And until a human crosses a line by feeding them or something like that, they really want nothing to do with us.
Great, Michael, we can't thank you enough. This has been such an incredible presentation and connection to all the work we do, both at the Everglades Foundation, in our curriculum, and in our classrooms and virtual classrooms. So can you send us off with a career connection? Kind of what do you need to do what you do?
You need passion, you need heart, you need to really love what you do, and just don't stop till you get there. There's no blueprint, right? You get all the tools that you need in regards to education. You study what you need to study, you go to college, and then really it's your heart. You got to follow your heart. You have to find a project that you're passionate about, and just not stop till you get where you want to get to. And involve a lot of connections, you know, volunteer in as many places as you possibly can. There's so many opportunities to be a part of projects, to learn from other biologists, to learn from other animal professionals, especially in South Florida. We're really lucky where there's a lot of opportunity.
We are so lucky to live here in South Florida and really have so much access to such an incredible environment. Thank you, Michael. We are so ready to go with Crocs this year. And so I will let you know that the chat is still going. They're like, how do we get in touch? Can you come to my classroom? Can we Zoom in my classroom? Can we have some virtual field studies? So we'll be in contact and share information as you allow us to, and really keep our teachers involved and engaged as we move forward.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and looking forward to keeping in contact with all of y'all.
Thanks a lot, Michael. And next up, session 5 at 1:55 p.m. You have attended Everglades 101. Now it's time to go to Everglades Restoration for Majors. So with our amazing Dr. Steve Davis, advancing Everglades Restoration at 1:45. See you then.